Swim Things in Blue Springs, your one-stop shop for all things swim. Pools, spas, patio furniture, swimwear, and accessories. Visit them in Blue Springs or at www.swimthings.com.
Well, do what we can to create a foundation for the next generation to take it further. We've certainly seen that in the sport of swimming, how when somebody comes along and think that no one will ever be greater, the world records fall. If we're doing it right, we as people, as a society, evolve.
Hi, everybody. We're so happy to have you here for this episode of The Journey. Our guest today is a legend in swimming history. He's won 10 Olympic medals, 5 of which were gold. He's a world and American record holder, a national champion, and has become a shining example of excelling while dealing with diabetes. And we're so happy to have with us today Gary Hall Jr. Gary, great to see you.
Hey, thanks for having me on.
So it's been a while since I've seen you. We haven't talked in probably about I don't know, probably even getting to double-digit years. So it's good to catch up.
It is good to catch up. Yeah, I try to avoid your races because I don't need any more humiliation. Aging is enough for me.
Swimming has become the fountain of youth for me. I try not to think about getting older, but you can't avoid it. So one of the things that's always struck me throughout your swimming career is not just the fact that you are extremely fast and extremely talented, but you, I guess, and probably even one of the many peaks of your swimming career were extremely fast and extremely talented while dealing with diabetes, which is just hard enough to deal with for a normal person. You were diagnosed in 99, so it's been about 21, 22 years since the diagnosis. So how has the treatment changed in all these years?
Treatment has changed dramatically. So there was the introduction of continuous glucose monitoring devices, which is a little wearable device that gives you a readout every minute or so continuously of your blood sugar levels. So before, when I would have to manually test my blood sugar, I'd take a lancet, draw blood from my fingertip, put it into a machine. It would give me a readout. And based on that number, whether it was high, I would give myself insulin, or if it was low, I would have some carbohydrate to help correct the process. So you had throughout the day, if you were very ambitious, 5, maybe 10 glimpses of where your blood sugar was throughout the day. And what this new device does is gives you not just, because it's continuous, you get the trend. So if I tested my blood sugar before, I could see 150. Well, it could be 150 and dropping like a stone, or it could be 150 and rising quickly. So you didn't have any indication of which direction it was headed. So being able to sense these trends, you're able to avoid the potential devastating consequences of mismanagement blood sugar levels, where you go too low and can go into a coma and die, or you go too high and can go into a seizure and die.
And how many times, let's say in a given week, would you have to stop workout completely, prick your finger, and wait for that result to know if you are able to even continue training?
The more, the better. And that's the truth is that the more often you're testing, the better control you're able to have and start to micromanage blood sugar levels so you're not correcting these huge swings. That has a stabilizing effect overall in blood sugar management. Back when I was training, I would never really go longer than 45 minutes or an hour. Anytime there was a break in practice, every time I was about to get into the water, as soon as I got out of the water, And then, a competition day, it's critical because if your blood sugar is out of range just by a little bit, you're compromised in such a way that this is a race measured to the 100th of a second. Is that a difference of, yes, just not able to compete if it's off slightly, the slightest bit. So I did my best without that CGM, continuous glucose monitor, through my career. The advancement of that, there are now faster insulins that are available that help making corrections quicker. Smart insulins are on the horizon where they'll respond based on elevated blood glucose levels. And so that is really exciting. And then in the areas of diabetes research, you've got a big commitment to stem cell research. And a lot of people are figuring out how we can either replenish beta cells in our pancreas that produce insulin that breaks down the food that we need to operate, and also T regulatory cells, the cells in our body that are attacking those beta cells in our pancreas that ultimately gives us type 1 or autoimmune disorder diabetes.
That's absolutely amazing how much advancement has been happening in studying and treating diabetes.
20 years.
Yeah. I mean, in the scheme of things, we think 20 years is a long time, but in kind of the scheme of medicine, that's like a blink of an eye. I mean, they've really done some great things.
Yeah, yes. Commendable work, yes, but not fast enough. 20 years is a long time to wait. The clinical trial process, FDA approval process. We've seen this. This has really come to light with the advancement of the vaccines, the COVID vaccines. The fact that it's, you went from bench to bedside to, vaccination type of stuff in such a short window. That's unprecedented. And so,
Right.
It highlights that it can be done a little bit faster. Whereas otherwise, new drug approvals and stuff like that that come to market as 10 years. I mean,
It could be faster. You're right.
Very, very frustrating for the patients. Yeah.
Right. What warning signs did you experience before your diagnosis that made you think that something might not be right?
I think we've all kind of bonked. You've heard that expression in athletics, bonking. That is basically where your blood sugar kind of crashes. And so whether it's from aerobic exercise or something like that, we've all felt like just like a little shaky, at the end of a race so that was the first thing that I started noticing was a trembling in my hands. And that was in practice. And I quickly figured out on my own that if I got out and got some Gatorade, I felt better. It was like all of a sudden I felt normal again and could think clearly and just deep breath and get back in and continue practice. And that went on for a while. So it's a horrible feeling. It's a loss of control. I don't know if anybody who's fainted or blacked out or anything like that. I mean, it feels like those moments right before you kind of go. I mean, you kind of see spots, everything turns red, like you can't stand up on your own. Low blood sugars are a horrible feeling. You're not a very, very difficult time communicating. Your brain's kind of shut off. So a lot of people end up in the emergency room with that hypoglycemic reaction.
And it can be, you as an athlete, you're probably just thinking, oh, I'll just push through this. And it's not just something like, oh, I'll push through this wall. It's something that could be even much worse. So I'm sure a lot of people have gone through that.
Yeah, we're conditioned to push through pain and, overcome adversity. So there was a little bit of that. But, with the type 1 diabetes, which is what I have, which is the autoimmune disease, you don't wake up one morning and say, I'm sick, I feel horrible. So there's a trigger in your immune system where your own body starts attacking the cells in your pancreas, and those are killed off slowly, over a longer period of time. And so less and less you're able to break down the foods. The sugar starts to build up in your bloodstream, coagulating, thickening, and so you feel more and more sluggish, lethargic, irritable, confused. And then, so it's difficult to miss. And oftentimes kids go in with these symptoms describing this condition, and they're misdiagnosed. They're told that they have the flu or something like that. They're sent home, or they're given some antibiotics. And, 3 weeks later, they're in the emergency room. So we, as a diabetes community, there's been a lot of awareness campaigns out there to help address this, to help bring this more to the forefront of doctors' attention more than anyone, so that they are screening for this, knowing the symptoms early on, and not missing it the first time.
So as we said, this diagnosis came around in '99, and I remember when you made that public and everybody was thinking, oh, Gary Hall's swimming career is done. There's no way you could be a diabetic and be an elite level athlete, much less even think of qualifying for the Olympics. And then there you go. You qualify for the 2000 Olympics, win a gold medal, qualify for the 2004 Olympics, win a gold medal. And I would imagine there was something in your head saying, I'm gonna silence these doubters. How much did all that conversation influence how influence your career moving forward in terms of your diabetes?
Well, if that voice that you said, I'm going to silence these doubters, was ever there, it was not initially. Who am I to argue with these doctors who are telling me that it's impossible to go to swim at the Olympic Games with type 1 diabetes? It's impossible. I didn't go to medical school. I don't know anything about diabetes at this point upon diagnosis. So I had to take that and surrender to the fact that my swimming career was over initially, and so that wasn't easy. And those there were a lot of steps along the way. There was a good support team, thank goodness, that I was able to come in contact with, that I would not have been able to proceed without. Dr. Ann Peters is regarded as a foremost authority in diabetes management and sport and physical activity. And I was really fortunate to connect with her. And what we did together changed what is being taught in medical school. The way that I managed diabetes was different than anybody else had been before. And I was part of a group. There were obviously other athletes, many of them high-level athletes that had type 1 diabetes in the past, but there weren't books on addressing the stuff. There really wasn't a how-to playbook to be able to perform at your best, and with this consideration, a substantial consideration. So there was no differentiating between anaerobic versus aerobic and the different impacts that it has on blood sugar levels. So I am really proud to play a part in a group of people that have contributed to having better resources available to a newly diagnosed kid today that is on a sports team and doesn't want to give up their dream of competing in sports and living an active, healthy, fulfilling lifestyle.
Yeah, I think you should definitely be proud of that, because I'm sure there are a lot of kids who are now in swimming because they've seen that it is possible. And I think you should be proud of that.
No, thank you. And, also I just want to hand off credit to so many other people too. There's so many other athletes out there today that are doing such incredible things and inspiring those same kids.
Yeah. Well, among the legacies that you've had, like you said, you've helped with diabetes research and treatment and everything like that. Your legacy for yourself is really good in your own right. But we can't let the viewers continue without knowing that there are you were part of a great accomplished swimming family. I mean, I can't imagine a bigger swimming dynasty if there has been one. I mean, your father was in 3 Olympics, your uncle was in the Olympics, your grandfather, big national champion in his day, and of course, your mother was a very exceptional swimmer too. At what age did you start to understand that you had all these superstar athletes in your family?
I think as far back as I can remember, I knew that my father was an Olympic swimmer. I was almost 2 years old, about 2 years old, when he competed in the 1976 Olympic Games. I was there, to see him carry the flag for the United States of America in the Olympic Games. In the opening and closing ceremonies, like it was an awareness. And that was just all you know is all you know in growing up, right? Like that was just dad, but people often talk about that lineage, right? And that I come from all these swimmers and there's some genetic inheritance there. But I think that the real advantage was that the pool was a home to me. That this was something that we did as a family, that familiarity, of the environment, of the pools that my family was responsible for building in Cincinnati and in Phoenix, that was a family place that I would go. I'm one of 31 cousins on my mother's side, and almost every single one of them would be there on a daily basis, along with hundreds and hundreds of other kids that had joined the team. So my family, through their involvement with the sport, knew that it was a community center that brought people together in a healthy way, that this was contributing to the benefit of neighborhoods and to schools and to kids, and earning scholarships and rehabilitating injuries through physical therapy. And so all of that was innately known to me growing up. But more than anything, it was just the familiarity, just being comfortable in the water. I mean, anytime we took a vacation, it was to a swimming destination. I mean, we just are a family of watermen, water people.
I can't imagine the pressure you must have felt as you were starting your own swimming career. Did you feel any pressure to continue this family legacy?
I've always been oblivious. And Jeff, you know me well enough. I'm oblivious to almost everything, not just the pressure. So I don't know. I was aware that there were expectations, but those expectations were from other people, not from my parents. If my dad had tried to coach me or really be more involved than he was, he took a very hands-off. He pushed us into the pool and then left. Like we were swimmers, we were going to swim practice, but he wasn't going to tell us how to do a better flip turn or adjust hand position upon entry. He was capable of it, and that was a decision that he made, and I think the right decision. If he had really tried to get more involved in my and I felt like that pressure was coming from him, I would not have responded well. I would not have continued in the sport. I would not have been successful. So it's a difficult balance on how, as parents, we push our children, and where does that fine line between encouragement and pushing too hard? And it's hard to talk about because each kid is different, right? How much they need to be pushed, motivated to participate, to get the best out of them. And so, there's personalities to assess, and there is not a one size fits all on how to do that. But, my father's involvement, I think it worked for me.
Yeah, everyone has their own journey. So I've heard you mention two legends as inspiration for you, Duke Kahanamoku and Johnny Weissmuller, both of whom are Olympic sprint champions. In what sense did they enhance your career?
Well, Duke Kahanamoku is one, maybe the first. I mean, especially if you're looking at the United States swim team from those years. I mean, he is perhaps not just a first representative of diversity in the sport of swimming, really, at least at the elite level that I'm aware of. Also, just his heritage. He was a waterman. He was swimming in the ocean, before he was swimming in pools, and I loved that because my connection to the ocean is tremendous. I grew up swimming in the ocean. I fell in love with swimming in the ocean. So I think that shared interest, and obviously the surfing piece too, and the Hawaiian shirts and the lifestyle that he led after his Olympic victories. He was appointed sheriff of Waikiki or something like that. It was just like an honorary position where he was just able to just be a good ambassador for aloha lifestyle. I always thought that was cool. And then Johnny Weissmuller, what he did with Tarzan movies, and just the same thing. Like, they both had a lifestyle outside of the sport that was fascinating, and something that I related to as much as the fact that we were also sprinters in the pool.
Jeff told me about the two of you being teammates at for a year at the University of Texas. So why did you choose Texas and not Indiana, where your dad and uncle went?
Indiana wasn't really an option for me. I wasn't going to go back there. I looked at other schools. I took a recruiting trip to UCLA. Ron Stix Ballatore. I always loved that guy, just personality on the pool deck. Those who knew him loved him. Real character. And I liked LA, and the UCLA campus was great. I had a great time. And then that was the last year that they had a men's swimming program. So it was dropped. And my life would be so different today if I had gone to UCLA instead of Texas. So I was close there. John Urbanchek got me on a recruiting trip up to Michigan. And I love John Urbanchek. And what was neat was that John overlapped both my father's swimming career and my swimming career. So John coached my dad when he was a little guy. So they knew each other. And I remember John saying, "Hey, listen, I know it's a long shot to get you to come back here to the cold Midwest. But, try it out." And I went on my recruiting trip in September, and it snowed there.
That's a hard no.
He laughed and he was like, "I know you're not coming here." But everybody, again, everybody who knows him loves him, John Urbanchek. So I did look at a couple different options, and Texas. I thought I was going to go down there and find Willie Nelson and Waylon Jennings, and some honky tonk stuff. And I knew that it wasn't the right program for me. And I love Eddie, and have a lot of friends from that team that I still stay in touch with. Some of my best friend probably was from those years, from that year at Texas. I learned a lot out of it, but I knew that it wasn't. And Eddie's so good about identifying the personality that will flourish under his leadership, and I think he probably made an exception for me because I was talented, because I did have potential that he recognized, and he probably and I really respected him, and so it was hard to leave I really had to, because it was all unknown. I hadn't gone to the Olympics. I hadn't even been successful, really, when I told Eddie that I was leaving. And so it was a real leap of faith to exit that program. And I thought at the time that I could do it a better way. And that's not a slight on Eddie. That just for me, for what I needed, what sprinting needed was different than what anybody was delivering at the time. And I ultimately had success based on that faith. And now this new generation of swimmers have embraced a lot of what Mike Bottom and I, again, sharing credit with the people who deserve it. There were a lot of people in the mix and how we changed the way sprinters were trained and competed. And now you see in all the best sprinters in the world that have taken from what we were developing at that time.
Well, that 1 year you spent at Texas was a pretty big one. You helped the Longhorns set the American record for the 400 free relay at the NCAAs. So what prompted you to leave Texas, and why did you not transfer to another university?
I did transfer to another university. I was enrolled classes, fall enrollment at the University of Arizona. And I was going to swim under Rick DeMont, who I growing up in Phoenix, had known Rick for a long time and love Rick. He's a great sprint coach. Rocket, as those who know him call him. And we connected more on a philosophical level, and so I was enrolled, and then the summer. So I think I sat down and talked to Eddie about 3 months after I arrived in Texas. So before the end of the season, I ended up breaking the American record as part of that relay at NCAAs. I have to say I was disappointed really with the results at NCAAs personally and individual events. But the decision had already been made. I had already, signed the transfer papers and everything by the time, and then had a big breakthrough. The summer after my freshman year, I went back to Phoenix, trained there through the summer, and qualified summer nationals for the World Championships, which really would make anyone second guess the decision to leave. Like, oh, maybe I'm just hitting my taper now, from the Texas season. Maybe, was leaving the right decision. But I was growing. I grew 3 inches from the time I left high school to the time my freshman year. So once I got to college, I grew 3 inches. So I was still developing, and the freedom over that summer when I was back in Phoenix after my freshman year, that's really when I first started experimenting with sprint specific type training, the training that I thought could be done to get better results. But there was definitely some questioning in there. Was this, based off of the training that I did at Texas, should I have left?
Yeah, we thought that summer we were all watching you swim so well that summer. It's like, oh, he's gone. What we could have had with Gary. But, I'll say this, Gary, I never knew that you and Eddie had that conversation and you kind of had already made the decision to transfer long before the season's over. I mean, it's not to say it answers a lot of questions that I had, but I guess it makes sense because, I mean, if you know that something's not right, you're not going to just wait through the next 4, 5, 6 months and see how it goes. If you know it's not right and it's in your heart, you might as well just admit that right away and even tell the coaches, because it does make the environment a little bit better. And a testament to you and to Eddie that you guys didn't even say anything. I mean, I don't think any of us on the team were in the know about that kind of thing. We were all just going through that season. So Like you said, it must have been a tough decision to make it at certain points.
Yeah, I mean, I knew 3 months in. I think it was months more, a couple months more before I had the conversation with Eddie. So it wasn't, but yeah, yeah. I wasn't swimming well down there. Jeff, you can attest. I was so slow, and always was. Even after we were doing our own. Doing our own training at the race club, such a slow in-season swimmer, like pathetically slow. And so, that was tough because I had a full ride scholarship, and I knew Eddie could use that, and he ended up, pulling in Neil Walker the following year, and Neil was, a powerhouse. So it worked out.
Yeah, it did. So that year after your freshman year, and then spending a little time with Rocket at Arizona, you had that time where you were in your very early 20s and essentially a professional swimmer. You weren't at a university training for the '96 Olympics. And back then, it wasn't the lifestyle of professional swimmer is not what it is now. I mean, it wasn't the all these sponsorship deals that were available. How were you able to continue that training while I guess trying to just keep a roof over your head?
Yeah, well, I never did swim for Rocket, so I was enrolled for classes. I went to the World Championships and did well there. I placed second in the 50 and the 100 behind Popov, who was the Olympic gold medalist from the last games and the world record holder. And at that time, it was much more black and white in terms of amateur status. The '92 Olympics was the first dream team. So that was like the first professionals in the Olympics, really. And then all the other national governing bodies outside of basketball kind of fell into line, but that policy change within these organizations took years, some of them. And at '94, if you took like a plane ticket to a swim meet, you were considered a professional. Now, there was exceptions for the World Championships where you would retain your eligibility if you went to represent the United States in that regard. But if I wanted to go to a Europe meet and they wanted to put me up in a hotel, I was a professional athlete if I took that. So by losing, status, eligibility. And so after the World Championships, I knew that the people that I needed to be were international swimmers. And that if I wanted to continue to race these people, that I was more interested in that than going to NCAAs. And so, yeah, I knew that after those World Championships that I had a shot at winning at the Olympics. And so it was hard. It took hustle to get through. I did not, at the time, USA Swimming was paying their national team $1,200 a month. That was the most that you could earn. And doesn't go far. And so I was out hustling different sponsors. I was at one time in my swimming career sponsored by a licensee of the Grateful Dead, Gibson guitars, Guinness beer, Barbasol shaving cream. Like, Speedo wasn't interested. There was a riff with Dennis Pursley, and he was the national team director, and I was blacklisted in a lot of ways for speaking up because I was campaigning hard to unionize, to create a swimmers association, a players association, akin to tennis or basketball or any of the other professional sports that we needed to organize in order to change that $1,200 a month with no rights really to earn outside of that. And so as a result of that, I suffered tremendously professionally. And I also had a marijuana suspension that was politically motivated. Please name any other swimmer in the United States that has been suspended for marijuana use. I can't think of another. So enrolled in another political thing that affected my ability to get sponsors and villainized me in the sport. So yeah, I mean, I really was limited as to the Grateful Dead and Guinness beer for support to continue my swimming career. And that's all I wanted. It's just enough money to continue going to meets and competing, and put a roof over my head. And it wasn't there. It was never there, really, from United States Swimming. They weren't making the initiative to try to improve the conditions for the athletes that were representing them, because there's a long line of people that are just a hundredth or a couple tenths of a second behind you that'll replace you happily for no money. So that was difficult in a very narrow mindset, from the sport, the leadership of the sport at the time, and it has changed. And that same time that I came into the sport, there were a couple of young guys. Mike Unger was one of them, and Matt Farrell. And they both were so much more progressive than the old regime at USA Swimming. That they had fresh ideas on how to market the sport and what would be good for the swimmers, and it both accomplished so much to better the conditions for the swimmers through these many years that they've. Matt Farrell has since moved on from the sport, but Mike, everybody knows Mike. He's around the pool, the get it done guy at USA Swimming. So I don't know. It was just an interesting time to be considered a professional athlete. It was crazy, and this is the irony out of all of that, is that when I was told that I had diabetes, I was told that it was the end of my swimming career, and it was only through the work, professional work, the job that I had in diabetes, that I was able to support my swimming career. I was married, after my diagnosis, I sold my car to get to the 2000 Olympic trials. And you said it, nobody thought I was going to make the team. So people don't remember that. I mean, Phelps changed everything in terms of professional opportunities. Obviously, what he made is in the stratosphere, but you've got a handful of swimmers now that can make, there's still probably, what's Matt Griever's making a year now? I'd be shocked if it's more than $100,000. There's a handful of people making that type of money. It's probably closer to 50,000, somewhere in between. I don't know. I've been out of it for a long time, but it has improved. There were only just a few people making money beyond that $1,200 a month stipend from USA Swimming when I jumped ship into the professional ring.
Well, we were talking about how the diabetes treatment and study took so long to get where it is now, and I think it's still taking so long for swimming itself to really be able to understand that athletes are really in need of this kind of support. And we have the International Swimming League right now, and that took probably 4 or 5 years of just conversation before they could even think of how to even make it happen. So I know personally, having been in that professional swimming arena in the mid 90s, no, it was very tough. You really had to kind of scratch and claw for every single dollar in scholarship you got. It wasn't as easy as just calling up, like you said, calling up any swimwear company and say, can you give me something? It was very difficult at the time. And I remember all the conversations that were being had at the time. And I remember your name popping up a lot about, you wanted to unionize. I think there were a lot of people behind you, but of course, when it's not supported at the top, that's not an easy thing.
No. And, and look at how much resistance ISL has received from the top. There's a battle going on, and it takes more than 4 or 5 years of conversation. It's taken a billionaire who's thrown a lot of money at this thing, and thank God it's here. These were the dreams that we were discussing ad nauseum in hotel motels at swim meets across the United States for so many years, dreaming of this to one day happen. And so to see that realized now is really neat.
Yeah. So this rivalry with Popov that I guess really did start at the '94 World Championships and continued for 6 years, even longer, actually through 2004. This is something I've always wondered. I mean, for us on the outside looking in, it made for great television. I mean, obviously the media like to hype that up, and even as someone who follows swimming very vigorously, I really count it as one of the best swimming rivalries there's ever been. But for you, was it a friendly rivalry between the two of you, or not so friendly?
No, it was not a friendly rivalry. Yeah, we hated each other.
Was it the kind of the U.S. Russia thing, or was it just the personalities?
Yeah, different personalities. Sure, we'll astrologically incompatible. We'll write it off to however you want, but we hated each other, and I think there has to be an element of hate for any rivalry to exist. Mutual respect, respect for their ability, right? Like that is okay. But if you look at all the great rivalries, there's something that just pushes you a little bit harder than any other opponent, and makes you celebrate, at least internally, those victories over that opponent when it happens, and makes the sting of defeat that much more intense with that particular opponent. And Popov was that guy for me. And
that's interesting. And so I imagine when you talk about the sting being lessened, I imagine that gold medal in the 50 free in 2000 not only took the sting out of losing in '96 by tenths of a second, but you finally got your hand to the wall first over, this was what, 6 years of trying to get that done.
Yeah. Anybody in the sport knows what it's like to put in years to make something happen. And there's some satisfaction in being able to do that. Out of I won 2 out of the 3 Olympic races against Popov, if I had narrowed it down. There are a lot of other swimmers in the pool that had to be beat too, but that one in particular, anytime I could beat Popov, it felt good. Yeah, I mean, yeah.
Of course. So over all these years, have you two been able to kind of patch things up now that you're both not swimming anymore?
We saw each other at the World Championships in Barcelona a lot of years ago, and spoke briefly, and it was cordial. It was friendly. I respect what he contributed to the sport, and I admire his ability in the water. I've said before that I wasn't able to beat him until I respected him, at least in those mentioned ways. And so, yeah, I don't know. Maybe we'll be friends one day.
I think all three of us can agree that every person is different as far as their mental toughness and their motivation and challenges they've been through and important things like that. But with that being said, I always appreciated you being yourself in the way you speak about the competition and how you present yourself and the swag represented before the races. And with all that being said, how do you get into that persona before you swim?
A tailor will make the robe or the cape. So that's kind of how I get into it. I don't know. Horsing around behind the blocks is something that we do, that you see it, like go to any age group, watch little kids before their races, and they're having fun, joking, slapping each other on the ass, whatever. You know, they're just like yucking it up and horsing around. And I never matured out of that, I guess, in some ways. You know, I love it, you know, seeing pictures of little kids, you know, doing the bicep flex. You know, that's fun. It is a way to have fun and add some showmanship to the sport without being disrespectful to the people that you're racing against. And why not? And it wasn't like it was so radical for the sport of swimming, but you know, like look at all the other sports, like the characters are celebrated. You know, the oddest personalities in the NBA are the ones that gather adoring fans. And you know, and at the time that I started doing that, you know, like WWE wrestling, fake wrestling was way more popular than the sport of swimming. Why? Because it was the only entertainment. And it was jacked up guys on steroids acting like weirdos. And the ratings were through the roof. It was like, and so, you know, I just like was criticized so much because I brought just like a little element of that. And of course, you can't compromise the performance at all to do any of that stuff. I mean, you look like an idiot, right? Like if you're going to go parading around chest thumping, you know, with all this bravado and you can't back it up, it's a big gamble, right? Like, so there was a huge risk that I was taking, you know, by behaving that way, because the critics were so relentless. They're so mean. You know, and I didn't care. I didn't care. I mean, I had short words from.
Yeah, that was quite obvious.
What would you say?
But I wasn't, again, like I never disrespected anybody else on the blocks. You know, yeah.
What would you say is your proudest Olympic moment?
The bronze medal in the 100 freestyle in Sydney. That one to this day remains. I'm proud of that. I obviously like winning, defending the title in the 50 freestyle, being the world's fastest swimmer. That's nice. I like that. But the 100 free in Sydney, I just had no business being there. That was just a tough guy. That was just tough guy. You know, true grit type of determination that, you know, Michael Klim had, his split was the difference that, you know, Australia won the 4x100 freestyle relay, and that was a stinging loss for the United States. That was the night before. He broke the world record on the lead off of that relay, put him way out in front, and, you know, we never really caught up. And yeah, I was able to outtouch him by 100th of a second for that bronze medal and keep him off the podium, take a little wind out of his sails. But I had been diagnosed not that long before. You know, I was out of the water a long time. Like, I wasn't even supposed to be there. Nobody with diabetes had ever competed in the Olympic Games before. I wasn't supposed to be there at all. And, you know, I was able to be such a phenomenally gifted and tough competitor. You know, and so yeah, I was always proud of the fact that I got that bronze medal, just because I knew that really didn't have the training I didn't have, I wasn't as talented in that event as the guys that I was beating in that race.
Well, another moment that always stands out for me is that 50 free in Athens in 2004. I mean, all the talk was Gary's the grandpa of the team. I mean, you were pushing 30, which at the time, everybody thought you couldn't be a swimmer. I mean, being a swimmer, an Olympic swimmer at 29 was considered almost impossible. And here you are, what was it, like a month or two before your 30th birthday, and there you are beating the world in the 50 free. On top of which was a whole week of the media talking about Gary Hall having sour grapes about not being in the final of the 4 and free relay. So everything seemed to be kind of just against you, I guess. I guess on the outside, obviously not on the inside. You knew you could do it, and to see you be able to get your hand on the wall first in that 50 free after a lot of odds were against you, I think speaks a lot to your personality. Like you said, you don't really think about what's going on around you, what people are saying. You just get up there and you do it. Now, I've said it's probably one of my favorite moments of watching you as an athlete. What did it feel like for you to be able to get that gold medal, not just at 29 years old, but also to defend that title?
That was a magic night. I mean, it was such a beautiful sunset, outdoor venue, with the Greek ruins in the background, and finals right about sunset. And I remember just like pausing to take in the beauty of the sunset, like right before the race, just this warm breeze, and just be present. Like it was really, really nice. And yeah, look, the odds, I don't care where you're sitting, it's like the odds are stacked against you. Especially if you're chasing big game, like if you want to do something great, the odds are stacked against you. Okay, that's the truth of life. Hard knocks, they're coming your way. And once you get up near the top, people are going to take a shot at you that wouldn't otherwise, and gun for you. So, yeah, I mean, any swimmer that wins can list out a huge number of reasons why they shouldn't, why they shouldn't, period. Why, and those are excuses. Those are excuses, and you have to either be a fool or stupid to ignore what the risks are, what the odds are, but you do everything you can. That's why we train. That's why we go to practice every day, is to minimize or affect those odds, right? And so I knew that I had done everything that I could to, earn some advantage over anybody else in the pool, and that, they all have reasons why they shouldn't win too. Anybody else in the pool. So I don't know. You can focus on that stuff, or you can, defy it. And that's what the champions do.
I could say that you're probably one of the most inspirational athletes I've seen. But first off, how did you ever feel like teammates or coaches misunderstood you as a person or even as an athlete?
Yeah, thank you. There was a compliment in there. Thank you for that. Did I ever feel misunderstood? I felt like that I was many times an outsider in the sport. That I, even with the heritage and growing up in the sport, that something in my personality was different than most swimmers. And I always maintained, I through my many years of swimming, never dated a swimmer, always had an outside life outside of the sport. When practice was over, It was something that I could and walk away from. I was training at Berkeley. I'd be, going over to San Francisco to look at galleries. I'd be at a gallery opening. My wife, it was not a swimmer. Didn't know anything about swimming. Didn't really care. This is great. It was great for me to have a life outside of the sport, and that particularly was appreciated when it came time to retire. And that's what so many swimmers struggle with, is that it's so consuming, and it becomes your identity, the sport. And so it helped me in the transition out of the sport. But yeah, misunderstood is a way to phrase it. I felt like I had a different perspective, and there's a lot of groupthink, and single file lines and circular swim and rules, lots of rules. At least at the time in the sport, and I never did well with rules.
What do you think current or even future coaches can do to learn on how to treat each athlete in a way that best suits, each personality, each competitor?
That's difficult because coaches already have so much on their plate, and you've got so many swimmers. Is it possible, if you've got 75 kids on a team, to really break down and say, oh, Johnny, let's delve into what his home life is like. What's motivating this individual to show up to practice every day? Why does he like swimming? What are his nutritional habits? Is he dealing with stuff at school that's affecting? They don't. Swim coaches don't have the capacity, the bandwidth to really address that in a meaningful way. So it's a challenge. It's a challenge to try to figure out how to help, because ultimately, if you are able to address that, you'll have a happier swimmer, and a happier swimmer is a faster swimmer. And so, the variance is so tremendous, right? We're talking about personality. It's a very complex thing. Our best psychologists and psychiatrists in the world don't understand the human brain. A little bit, yes, but not really. I mean, we're really at the birth of really understanding what's going on, right? And what makes up our different character and the pillars of personality, that affects everything that we do. But in particular, what motivates us and what demotivates us, what makes us happy and what makes us unhappy. And can we expect a swim coach to really understand that? When there's a team of 150 kids, probably that's a high expectation. So those that do show an interest, and I was very, very fortunate. Mike Bottom, graduated and the top of his class in psychology. Had some. He did it better than any other coach that I had come across. Some grasp on these things.
As your children grow up, do you see your championship mentality or your competitive desire to win in them?
That's expectations and pressure. I am much more concerned in seeing happiness in them. So I'm not concerned about carrying on a legacy. Like that, I sleep fine at night, knowing that my daughter's not interested in breaking a world record in swimming. So yeah, I care much more about their health and happiness than I do about carrying on a legacy.
Yeah, that's definitely a good way to probably be the best parent you can be.
Yeah, I'm a
Not that there was,
cheerleader, not a coach.
yeah,
When
like your dad did for you. Exactly. So what's keeping you busy these days, Gary?
I continue to be involved in diabetes stuff. So I was just named vice chairman of the International Board of Directors for Sanford Health, not Stanford, the Cardinal in Northern California, but Sanford is operating out of 36 states. It's an integrated healthcare system. And my cumulative work in diabetes care, patient advocacy, has graduated me up to the ranks of some prestigious boards, that being one of them. The other one is the National Youth Sport Health and Safety Institute, and that is under the American College of Sports Medicine. That's the largest organization of its kind for medical professionals involved in sport, physical activity, physical therapy, rehabilitation, and all that stuff. I've got involved in stem cell research for a long time ago, and its applications to bettering the human condition, addressing diseases and stuff like that. So that's something that I follow closely with. I've presented at stem cell conferences. Again, I'm having graduated medical school. This is something exceptional. Published in the British Journal of Sports Medicine on how to manage chronic conditions in sport and physical activity. So basically, the point of all that sports medicine stuff is that at a youth level, not just in sports, swimming, all sports, you got newer coaches, I'm going to say, oftentimes volunteer coaches. None of them have, we talk about the training in psychology and that type of stuff. They don't have medical school training. So, if there's a kid that shows up with type 1 diabetes or some other chronic condition, historically, those kids were politely sidelined or benched, or told that they can't participate. These volunteer coaches, that's scary. Tell me again about the coma part or the seizures or that type of stuff. And they're like nodding, but thinking this is a liability, and oftentimes just openly discriminating, unfortunately. So addressing that has been a real passion of mine. The Sanford Health Organization, we build hospitals internationally, something like 16 hospitals in Ghana and underserved communities that don't have access to care, any form of care at all medically. We opened up our last one in Costa Rica. And it's neat work to be able to build these kind of children's services and stuff in rural communities.
Yeah, I'm so fascinated by that. I knew you were doing a lot of work with diabetes and athletic performance, but I never knew it was really at that level. That's really fascinating.
Yeah, thanks. I strive to be the dumbest guy in the room. I surround myself with really smart people, and try to contribute where I can.
It's very nice. I mean, to me, I'm a nursing student. I'm going to be starting nursing school here pretty soon. And it's, really nice to see other people, especially people who have done, what I've done since I was born. But to see you guys, persevere and do so many great things in the medicine and community.
Commendable work. Great need for nurses, for all healthcare professionals. Obviously, with the pandemic, it has brought into focus how important these people are.
100%.
How society relies on health. And that it's more, it's really important.
Yep, and it's really real too.
So, congratulations. Bravo.
Thank you. You too.
We all do it.
Well, Gary, I really am quite excited to know that you're at the forefront of this, because as you said, don't know if there was ever a person that was at the Olympics suffering from diabetes. And thinking back on this now, I don't think there's anybody still at that high level who is, at the Olympics winning medals with diabetes. And, I think people like you are really helping them to let them know that it is possible. And then pretty soon we're going to see a lot of people that are going to feel like that barrier is now taken away. And, hopefully maybe even this next Olympics or the ones after that. We'll see.
Well, do what we can to create a foundation for the next generation to take it further. We've certainly seen that in the sport of swimming, how, when somebody comes along and think that no one will ever be greater, the world records fall, if we're doing it right. We as people, as a society, evolve. Onwards and upwards, hopefully.
Yeah. Well, Gary, it's been great having this conversation and catching up with you. And it's been very inspiring, even as someone who knows you quite well, to hear about the things how your life has brought you to this point. So thank you again for joining us.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me on, and really glad to reconnect with you, Jeff. Keep up the good work you're doing.
All right, so everybody, thank you for joining us as well. As we always say, it's not just about the destination, it's about the journey.